Hello and welcome to Media MD, your fortnightly dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back this fortnight to talk about what I brought to you last fortnight, Elliot, which was
Yes.
It Follows.
Yes, It Follows, which was, it's a horror movie. Spoilers.
Yep.
And I don't watch...
Yeah, sorry. It just, I just thought for a second, wait, did you not know it was a horror movie going into it?
Yeah.
We must have talked about that, surely.
No, I did. I don't know if we actually talked about it. I did know it was a horror film. And, I don't watch too many horror films. I'm quite easily spooked. But I liked this one.
Yeah.
So just to recap it for people who haven't seen it for a while, haven't
Give
seen
us
it
that
at
plot.
all. We start off with this girl called Annabelle who gets killed, and then we never hear about her again.
Yep.
I think she's only in it, like, this whole scene just exists to give it, like, an action-based start to the movie.
Yeah, I think it's to let you know... Well, so we're going to get into this. You know what? We've derailed already. Let's just stop the plot summary for a second, because I need to say something. This movie is so not a horror movie in so many ways. Like, it's like the first... Apart from this one opening scene, the movie is just... exploring the life of this character for the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
It's definitely a very unconventional horror film compared to the handful that I've seen. It definitely feels unique.
I think this first scene is there because without it, people would think, wait, have I walked into the wrong movie?
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, I was going to say I didn't really see the point of it, but I guess you're right. There's not much horror for quite a while after this, so I think it actually establishes what the movie is.
Yeah, and it establishes such an unsettling tone, right? Because this first scene is a girl runs out of her house, runs out into the middle of the street. Somebody asks, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah." She's kind of looking around, not seeing anything. We're kind of following her in this slow one-shot, panning around in a big circle. And then she just kind of runs back inside. And it's like, what just happened? What's going on?
Yeah, and there's because you mentioned like the sort of shot, this bit of cinematography, and I think this movie does this a lot, and I think it's something it does really well, is these very slow panning shots, and because I think slowness is something this film also does very well. I'll talk about that a bit later, but I guess to get back to
let's
the plot.
Continue the plot summary. Yep.
So we then meet Jay, who is our actual main character. And she is hot and everyone wants to have sex with her. And I bring that up because it's an important plot point. One of these people who wants to sex her is named Hugh. And they go on a date to the movies and he gets scared by some girl that Jay can't see. And it's a bit weird, but they go out again and they do the business. And then Hugh just sort of out of nowhere chloroforms Jay. And so she wakes up and he's not going about this very well, but he mostly has good intentions. It's basically...
For someone who, chloroforms her and ties her up, he's trying to help her.
Help her cope with something that he just did to her. But
help her out of a situation that he created is fair, but,
Yeah, it's probably one of the nicest ways to chloroform and kidnap someone, for sure. Anyway, so he gives her the 411 on this monster that he has just sexually transmitted to her. And, so the monster kind of approaches, and basically, the monster in this film will always follow you, but it only ever goes at like a walking speed.
Yeah.
And so basically he lets it walk pretty close and then lets them sort of run away. And she freaks out, but she doesn't really believe anything supernatural at this point. Anyway, so a lot of stuff sort of happens, but essentially she has a few more encounters with, I guess I'll call it It, because that's sort of what the movie does, even though, it's not the It from Stephen King's It. This is a different It.
Different It, of course.
Anyway, they eventually, there's all this sort of stuff. She encounters It a few times, and they eventually track down Hugh's real identity because he was using a fake name. And they find out his real name's Jeff, and they track him down, and he basically just re-delivers what he said before, but she actually
Yeah.
believes him now because she's been harassed by this thing.
He basically says to her, look, I was telling the truth. The best thing for you to do is just pass this thing on, because if it kills you, it's going to come back for me. So please just pass it on and be done with it. Like, it's shitty, but it's what you got to do.
Yeah, it sounds like basically the way you sort of handle this thing is to just pass the bat and hope that the next person does as well. Because, it's in your interest to get the person you tricked to trick someone else, because that moves it further away from you.
Yeah.
But I feel like you could never really feel safe, ever.
I know.
It'd be kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
And that's really the theme of this film. Anyway, so they all run away to like a holiday home where there's some more close encounters with this monster, which another little detail I haven't really talked about yet is it has this ability to change forms, which is great.
Yes.
It always takes the form that will sort of fuck with you the most in the moment.
Yeah, it seems to sometimes just take forms to fuck with you, sometimes take forms to get close to you by posing as someone who you might not notice. And God, I want to stop again to just point out how great of a conceit for a horror film this is.
Yeah. I think that'll be a whole section later.
Yeah. All right, let's not get into it now. Finish off your plot summary before I get carried away again.
So eventually Jay sleeps with Greg because he doesn't really believe in it, and she wants to pass it on to someone who she thinks will be able to handle it a bit better.
Yeah.
She was wrong. He dies.
Yes,
because he doesn't believe in it.
Well, he kind of says, "Hey, pass it to me. I'll keep an eye out and then we'll see what happens." And it doesn't show up for a few days. And he kind of gets complacent.
Yeah.
And it does show up, and it kills him, and he is dead.
Yeah, and so then Jay runs away, and there's this interesting scene where she just finds 3 random guys on a boat and sort of gets a bit undressed and starts to swim out there. And I think it's implied that she slept with at least one of them to pass the curse off for a little bit. So yeah, it's an interesting little isolated scene, because then she just sort of comes back home, and there's this guy called Paul who has been set up from the start of the film to kind of have a bit of a crush on her.
Yeah, he clearly has had a crush on her since they have been young.
Yeah, and so he sort of offers to have sex with her to sort of try and help her out, but she says no, and not really because she's creeped out by it, but actually like she doesn't want to hurt him. After what happened with Greg, she pretty fairly kind of feels like it's not going to go well. So they come up with a plan to attack the thing by breaking into, I guess, an abandoned pool, or a closed pool at least. And they surround it with electrical appliances with the idea they'll lure it into the water and then electrocute it. It doesn't go
it's a
very
good plan.
Yeah, it's a pretty good idea. It doesn't work. Instead, what happens is the thing just goes around and throws shit at Jay while she's in the pool.
Really pokes her with a few things too.
Yeah. And then Paul is kind of trying to shoot at it with a gun he's got, even though it's invisible to people who have not been infected. And he manages to shoot one of the other friends in the process, which is pretty... it was pretty poor form by him. But eventually they sort of get it in the water, and Jay manages to shoot it in the head, and get Jay out of the water. But they don't really believe it's dead, because there's this weird thing where it fills the pool with blood. It's kind of creepy. So then, then there's probably, I would say, the weirdest part of the movie that I think we'll talk about a bit more. But they go home. Jay does have sex with Paul.
Yeah.
And then the movie sort of ends with them walking hands, presumably actually in a relationship now, and there's like a creepy person walking behind them that's, I think it's heavily implied that it's the creature still.
Yeah. And then
I sort of had to check that Netflix had actually given me the whole movie, because it's not like I'm sort of fine with sudden or slightly ambiguous endings like this one got, but I think what really threw me here is Jay and Paul sort of suddenly entering an actual relationship felt like a bit of a weird way to kind of end the film. I don't know. It didn't feel like an ending to me in that way.
We do get... what's his name? Paul. We get him kind of... a scene of him in a car driving past what look to be prostitutes, clearly implying he's passing it on as well.
Which was an interesting thought, because I had this thought when we sort of have at the start of the film, there's this guy Hugh who, you know, wines and dines Jay pretty excessively before passing it on to her.
Yeah.
And you know, you got to think he got it at a one night stand in a nightclub, and you got to kind of think, well, isn't that easier? I don't know. I guess for me, a connection with the person makes it easier to sell them on the actual gravity of it after the fact. But it's I don't know. Just going and passing it on quickly with something like a prostitute probably feels like the easy way.
Yeah. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, maybe he just didn't want to do it like that, right? Like, you must feel so shitty. Like, that's your only real recourse because this thing can't be stopped. It follows. Anyway,
and so moving on from that, I think we should take some time. This is such a fantastic concept for a
oh my god, it's so good,
a horror thing. And I mean, you know, it's not just a great concept; it's very well executed. My favorite part of this movie was, you know, we talked about how they have these long panning shots, and they start to use it in the second half of the film because there'll be a long panning shot of it sort of walking up to someone.
Yeah,
and they won't notice. So there's, in particular, one stood out to me at the beach where we just kept having this shot, and you could see it slowly walking up to Jay from behind. But of course, no one else can see it, and Jay's facing the other way. And it's so tense and it's so slow, and that's the whole point of this monster is it doesn't jump scare you. You know, one of the other horror films I have seen is Paranormal Activity, and it sort of has the same formula a little bit where it's long build-up shots. But Paranormal Activity's sort of gimmick is that it has this long shot and then it's a surprise moment that you don't see coming and it's just a jump scare. Or maybe there isn't one. Whereas this is the opposite because it's a slow, long anticipation, but you know exactly where things stand. Like you're watching it slowly inch closer.
It's so good. It produces this level of tenseness in the same way that build-ups to jump scares do in other horror movies, but without being kind of cheap, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah. Or even just like, there's a scene I really love where Jay has gone back to school and she's sitting in class and you see out the window somebody walking towards her and she doesn't notice it at first, but then she does. And it's just this shot of you looking at Jay looking out the window, and out the window, a kind of blurry granny slowly walking towards her. And it's this movie manages to make these things so tense.
And because there's a few false alarms as well, like the ones where someone's just walking and you don't know if it's it yet. Like, you know, you totally get that thing where people who are infected come across as a bit crazy because you don't know because this thing's so casual and how it comes at you that you can get paranoid.
Jay and her group are talking to Jeff, the original curse holder. They're just kind of sitting out on the grass, and we kind of cut to seeing a woman kind of slowly walking down the path towards them. And as she gets closer and closer, Jeff kind of starts to freak out and is like, "Hey, can you see that lady? Can you see that lady?" And it's very like, oh, fuck. But it's just a lady walking past, and it's so terrifying.
So no, the direction of this film is so good. Just all these slow shots. The tenseness of the film is so strong and doesn't feel cheap at all. As we've sort of said. I guess the other thing that I want to call out was the music. You know, you talked about this a little bit in the prescription. But it's a lot of big 80s synth notes. Which, I mean, you know, this probably isn't fair because It Follows came first, but it very much reminded me of Stranger Things, which uses similar sort of 80s style soundtrack. But yeah, it's really good. It's a very strong, powerful sort of thing.
Another thing I like about this movie is it kind of feels like it's set in the 80s. Like, it feels like it's set in this time before technology made stories have to be bigger, right? Feels like a small town kind of story, but it's very much not set in the 80s because there's all kinds of weird anachronistic things that don't make sense.
See, it's interesting. Like, thinking on it now, there's nothing that jumps out to me as particularly unique to any era. Like, you know, probably fashion or something was quite modern, but Like, I think you could pass this movie off as setting in any sort of recent time. Like, I think it is a bit... It intentionally avoids using much stuff that is very specific to the last 15 years or something.
Well, this is something that I've read some articles and stuff. This is very intentional. It's meant to be a story that is kind of out of time in order to be, you know, not tied to any specific time period and not kind of dated.
Yeah.
Jay's friend
see
is
that,
kind of reading...
Oh, sorry. Oh, you do kind of see that in, like, it's a good idea because you see that in other things like like we've talked about the X-Files on here recently, and there's definitely a sense in a lot of the earlier seasons of that where the fact that they don't have mobile phones is very noticeable and very off-putting almost to watch in the 21st century.
Yeah, exactly. But this story, the way they tell this story, you don't feel like you're missing anything. You don't feel like the characters have anything missing. It's just kind of like it's telling a story about these characters, and their setting just makes sense, and you just get lost in Jay's life, and then in her life after she gets infected with a demon, I guess.
Yeah.
So. Did this movie spook you, Elliot?
Yeah, I was pretty spooked. I watched it alone at night, which is, ideal spooky conditions. And there was, it was definitely like at the end, there was just that sense of 15 minutes after I finished it, I was still very tense. I was just like, man, the adrenaline was still clearing its way out of my system, I think. Which is what you want from a horror film, I think.
Yeah, but the thing I like, I really like this movie, obviously. It's just so not... It doesn't feel like its goal is to scare you, right? It's not a movie that exists to scare people.
I'd almost say unsettle is its goal. It's just... It just fills you with tension and doesn't really let it go, even after the film's finished. Because really, the big thing this film pushes into you is that it's never over.
Yeah, which movies have to end, but nightmares don't, I guess. That's a good tagline for It Follows 2, still following. I get, coming soon.
I think I did read online that they've talked about doing a sequel, so I guess we'll see. I'd probably be interested in more of it. I really enjoyed this, but I think they said the sequel would explore the origin of it, which I'm not particularly keen on personally.
No, please no. It's an abstract force. That's what makes it so compelling.
Yeah, I would honestly just probably want the sequel to be more of the same. Just a new set of characters dealing with the same shit, I think could still be very interesting. Well,
yeah. So let's talk about Jay as a main character, right?
Yeah.
Because the story really is about her, kind of her loss of innocence in a lot of ways, right? We talked about it. I think one of the big plot threads is her and Paul, and her unwillingness to want to sleep with him around like 2/3 of the way through. And then obviously that kind of happens towards the end of the movie. And it's like you feel like she's lost herself over the course of this movie, It's really...
Yeah, definitely. There's, so obviously we start with her, and it's like the classic high school film romance where she's going on these dates with the guy, and then obviously, then it all goes wrong, and she's like legitimately like traumatized for quite a while.
Yes, she
after
is.
All this.
Yeah, she clearly is messed up by this, as you would be. Man, it really is just, this movie kind of defies traditional genre a bit, because it's not a horror movie. It's about this girl who's dealing with this horrific thing, and it's horrifying to us because we're kind of seeing it through her eyes.
Yeah, I think the movie does a really good job of selling you on the fact that the main characters are just pretty normal. Which is something that not every horror movie I've seen has succeeded in. There's no great importance to these characters. There's no real things that we learn about them that make us think, oh, these are characters that we should really care about. They're just kind of people who are dealing with not even people, like children, really, like young adults, I guess, but they feel quite young. It feels like
this is just a shitty situation to happen to some relatively normal teens/young adults.
Yeah. I think Jay is at university, so I was a little unsure on exactly where all of them were age-wise, but I think that's probably intentional. It's all just late high school, early 20s range is really it.
I actually don't think she was in university. I think that just was the American school system. They don't have uniforms. It feels kind of like what we would think of as university. She's I guess a senior is a thing in America. I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway.
maybe. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, and I tell you what, I would like the sequel to kind of explore a bit. And this is just, I guess this is the scientist in me. But if you took a plane trip, because I think it's implied that it can't, like, it walks, so you drive a long way and you've got a bit more time. So if you jet set halfway across the world every few months, are you safe? And also, if you hop on a boat, are you safe? So
there are a lot of questions that could be answered. I think the overarching thing that happens is it's going to get closer to you, right?
Yeah, the movie ends before it really comes up to explore these sorts of workarounds.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it doesn't feel like the movie skipped over them. Like, it doesn't feel like, because the protagonists are probably only at the point where they would want to start to consider that stuff at the end of the film. It doesn't really feel like they cheaped out on it till now.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because whenever I talk about movies like this, where a focal point of the movie is here's a thing that operates in a different way to what you expect. Something that always has mattered to me in the past is, it's good to know the boundaries of how this thing works so that then you can kind of explore those boundaries, right? Like, good science fiction will set that up. But it follows, I don't care about that because I don't think it doesn't feel like it's that relevant. It's not the story of these people overcoming this thing as much as it is just kind of the story of Jay, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I think it's something that I'd want to see explored a bit more in a sequel, just because it'd be the point. But definitely within the confines of this specific movie, it didn't at all feel like that was something that should have been addressed or needed to be addressed. Yeah, I don't know. I just can't think of... I'm trying to think of ideas for It Follows 2, and I can't think of any that make me think, I want to see that. No, I think I think this would be a movie that would age fine without a sequel.
Yeah, maybe it's They Follow, and now there's two of them, Elliot. Yeah, there's two of them, and one of them comes from one side, one of them comes from the other side.
Well, yeah, but the new one walks backwards as well. It's a big twist on the formula.
Yeah. No, it's like the ghosts from Pac-Man. One of them will just kind of follow you. One of them will try and get out in front of you. It follows. Oh, and it cuts you off. That's the title of the sequel. Yeah, no, I don't know. This movie just exists in its own little world, and I think that's what makes it so perfect,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the best concept for a horror monster that I've seen outside of maybe Cabin in the Woods is my other favorite horror film, and that's because it's barely a horror film. That's not really a horror film, to be honest. It tries to pretend that it is to trick people into seeing. It's a meta horror. It's a meta horror film. So I'd say this is probably the best concept I've seen, and it's very well executed. I definitely recommend this to horror fans and even people who aren't big on horror films. Like, as someone who doesn't always love them, I did love this one.
Yeah, and before you give your number, I want to just jump on that a bit more, because this is a movie that I've shown to people who aren't fans of horror, people who get scared easily at horror movies, and this movie will scare them, of course, but it's just so easy to fall in love with because of how well it executes just following these characters. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's fine. And so to put a number on it, I guess I would give this an 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. That's a pretty good number.
Yeah.
one of my favorites, I suppose. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion about It Follows.
Yes, and so now it is my turn to recommend something to everyone for the next 2 weeks.
Yep, and that something is
So I'm going to talk about the Netflix documentary series that's just called Explained.
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. You talk first.
Oh no! So, well, I'm interested. Have you heard of this, or are you familiar with it?
I have heard of it, I think. Isn't it like a TV show adaptation of a podcast, or am I completely wrong?
You were close, Reuben, but it is in fact. It's based on a YouTube video series that Vox made, and Netflix sort of picked it up to be a full-on TV show.
Yeah.
So season 1, they've said they're doing a season 2, but at the moment we're just talking about season 1, and it's 20 episodes that are about 15 to 20 minutes long, and they're all just a mini documentary on a topic. So to cherry pick some of the first few episodes, there's one on the racial wealth gap, and then they move on to designer DNA, and then a little bit later they do K-pop.
These are all very different topics.
Yeah. So that's where I was going with this. There's not really a theme. Like they do pop culture, science and technology, politics, really anything. Like it definitely feels like a bunch of people sat in a room and we're just like, what's anything that people are misinformed or ill-informed about? And nothing was off the table. They do a bit of everything, and it's really cool.
I'm interested to hear, have you watched any of the original YouTube videos?
No, I haven't. I might try and do that over the next 2 weeks to sort of try and compare it.
Because I'm interested, I don't think we've talked about this much on the show, but YouTube video essays are kind of going through a real renaissance at the moment, where a lot of really interesting, thoughtful content is being made on YouTube. And I guess this is the adaptation of that into the mainstream, explicitly, right?
Well, yeah, this is something that somebody decided was worth picking up and putting on, what's now effectively a legitimate, in air quotes, TV producer. Yeah,
it's interesting. I wonder what is lost or gained from that move. Maybe that's a question that we can talk about next week.
Yeah.
Next fortnight. Oops.
Yes. So I guess one other little thing, because these episodes, they're all so standalone and they're all such varying topics, there's no need to watch them in order, and I did not. And really? I don't really expect you to have to get through all 20 within the 2 weeks. It's very much a show where you can just sort of pick it up and put one on. When we were watching it here, we very much just would sort of be like, oh, you want to watch some Explained? And we'd pick out the next episode that sounded interesting. I think in saying that though, try and pick ones that sound really dull or uninteresting to you, because those probably ended up being my favorites. Because usually I think the ones that didn't appeal to me at all were the ones I knew absolutely nothing about, and that's where I actually learnt the most.
So what was your favorite thing to learn about?
Let me look up the title of the episode.
Come on, Elliot.
It has a weird title.
The question I was obviously going to answer. Ask.
Probably the most interesting one that really stood out to me was there's one that's just called ! Not the word, just the punctuation symbol. And it's on the history and usage of the !
What?
It's I don't know if I'd call it the most educational, but it was the one that stood out to me the most as just a really interesting topic I would have never have thought to watch something on.
Yeah. There you go.
Because and I'm looking at this list of episodes now, and there's so many. There are so many great topics, and something that I also wanted to bring up in this prescription, specifically because I didn't find out about this till I was about halfway through the series. Because Netflix does a terrible job of advertising it, but most of the episodes have celebrity narrators who narrate the documentary. So, for instance, there's an early episode that's on cryptocurrency, and they have Christian Slater do that one from Mr. Robot.
That feels very on the nose.
Yeah, and a lot of them are quite like that. I think my favorite one is there's an episode on the female orgasm, which of course is narrated by Rachel Bloom, which is just perfect.
That's so perfect.
I think it kind of became a fun part of it to try and figure out who they were for a lot of them. Guess
the voice, yeah.
Because Netflix doesn't list it, so you sort of got to go to the Wikipedia page to see the list. But
that's classic.
it's a fun little inclusion that really added to the experience for me in a simple way.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to check this show out. It sounds like it's right up my alley. I spend way too much time watching, the educational side of YouTube, and so this seems like it's the exact kind of thing that I want to be watching.
Yeah. So I think it'd be interesting to see what episodes you get through, and how you find the whole experience in 2 weeks.
I wonder what we'll talk about in 2 weeks. It'll be an interesting show to kind of, I guess, even do a plot summary of. But we'll find out in 2 weeks, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's the end of Media MD for this fortnight. But if you haven't got enough of our voices and you think, God, I wish there was a way I could listen to these guys talk about stuff every 2 to 3 days, well, you're in luck, because we have another show called Deep Impact, where we dive very deep into one specific piece of media instead of moderately deep into multiple specific pieces of media.
And so I think we've just hit arc 3 as this is coming out. I think we'll be 2 chapters into that, so there's still time to catch up.
I've gotten some of my friends into it, and one of my friends has been reading it for about 4 days, and they are about to finish the story. So you can definitely catch up if you really want to. You will get hooked. You will get deep into Pact as we have.
Yes.
You can check that out by going to doofmedia.com. And if you like other things that we do, you can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter is mediamdpodcast. We also have the Media MD Podcast website, where you can check out our Twitter, leave us a review on iTunes, send us an email at mediamdpodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to leave us your thoughts on media that we discuss. Also on the Media MD website, you can find all of the clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why is his industry so obsessed with making sequels to things that shouldn't have sequels. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Pen lid.
Pen lid. And we will see you next fortnight.